Yeah.
Oh,
Well, does it ever not? Is it ever not a relief?
it's just not working.
I said you couldn't join. Anyway, you can now, and you're here.
Here, I'm here.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, all right. Up and down. Okay.
We can talk about that.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. So the whole point of this kind of new thing that I'm just trying is the thoughtful idea. It's the idea of, you know, like when you go to listen to podcasts and watch things, it's always about doing something and you're bettering yourself. I listen to quite a lot of business podcasts as well. But I kind of want to make it more conversational so people can take what they want out of it. They might hear new opinions or they might find that they relate to it. So lots of different ways that they can kind of join in. But I obviously we wanted to talk about how tired and emotional everyone is. But do you want to just explain why you're qualified? Because I think this is what's so important, because there are so many people talking on Instagram, and they might be telling you what you should or shouldn't be doing and what they do that makes them feel better, but they're not qualified, and you are. So hit me with your CV.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm a clinical psychologist, and my specialism is in perinatal mental health. So I work with, it's around my area of interest, kind of pregnancy, birth, and the early years. But I do also speak to a lot of women. I speak to women who have older children. I run a parenting community for the village, and obviously I'm on Instagram a lot and speak to people, mostly women again, sometimes men, but I think generally it's women who tend to kind of seek me out. So I think so my sort of psychology experience has always been in health rather than mental health, and as part of that, over the years, I think I've just become more and more into trauma. So traumas that we might experience kind of now, you know, like in our here and now life, also intergenerational trauma, things that we've experienced kind of throughout the lifespan, and how that can affect us in how we are in existence. So I'm not quite answering your question, but I guess in all of that kind of different work that I've done, what I guess makes me qualified to talk about this at the moment is both the kind of theoretical knowledge about mental health, and particularly around trauma, which is how I frame what we have been going through and what we are still going through. But also then, I suppose, through that work, having access to so many different people. So I think a big part of my role and why I kind of go on social media is because I talk to so many people that I then have the knowledge to be able to say, you're not the only one who's going through this, you know, that there are so many other people who are experiencing similar things, similar symptoms. And not only that, but it's then kind of how do we kind of translate that to your experience in your life at the moment, which I think is often lacking from the conversation on social media, that kind of it, which I wish there was more news. I think often we do then read these things or hear these things, and then we might try and apply it, and because we can't apply it to our life because our life is so unique, then like, oh, that's because there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm just so messed up that actually none of these things are going to work for me. That can actually send us into a much worse position than we were if we hadn't read that post or read that blog. Or
it feels overwhelming in itself. It's like when people talk about journaling or getting up early, which, I mean, to have your time. We have, because like my 3-year-old woke up at 4:45 this morning. But if I'd have had in my head, I'm going to get up, the only way that I can get my shit done is by getting up early, and then you get woken up at 4:45. Like, anyway, it's even worse. But I think that's one of the things I know when people have said about journaling, meditate, all those things. It's another thing to do, and it feels, when you're in it, when you're feeling overwhelmed, and I've definitely been feeling it in the last couple of weeks, especially. It's like, it's just more. And I know it's good things to do, but you kind of think, oh God, that's something I've got to do, and it adds to your list, which is already kind of ridiculously long. So that overwhelm makes it difficult to stop and make sense of what actually would help you, I think.
Yes, and I think again that is about how it is presented, because if you were to sit down with somebody and express the overwhelm, because what happens overwhelmed, right, that we lose our access to our frontal lobes. Think about overwhelm as just another source of stress, and what we know about stress in our bodies is that when our nervous system is stressed, we lose our capacity to function in the same way that we would in our kind of normal everyday life. So it's just a very natural adaptive for threat response that our body just does automatically. But because we then try and carry on as if life is normal,
Mm.
but we're doing it with a reduced thinking capacity, we actually end up much more overwhelmed.
Mm.
If we could get rid of some of the overwhelm, if we can lower our kind of nervous system state and feel more grounded and feel calmer, then we can take in the information about the stuff that might be helpful.
Mm.
But if you're reading a state of stress, which most of us have been this whole past year, that
Mm.
was like that's just a chore. It's just a thing to do. And also, I think the thing about how we receive it from social media as well, because we're often reading in this kind of really numbed out state where we're not really quite conscious. It's almost like, especially with reels and stuff. But
Well,
even
you might see it. You might be looking at an ad for a
with
lipstick, and then you're looking at, and then someone's telling you how good it is if you do something for your mind, and then you're looking at a nice dress, and then you're not in the right frame of mind at all.
and I think because you're bombarded,
Mm.
it then does feel like it's just more, there's just so much, I'm just so consuming so much, and it's just that kind of information overload. So I mean, obviously I am on social media to talk about psychological issues, but social media isn't always the best place, obviously, to get that information because it is so fast paced. So if we're going to in a meaningful way that is actually going to help us think about how to apply it to our individual lives, we do need to really slow down so that we can do it thoughtfully,
Mm.
and then have the space and the time to consider, right, what is it out of all of these like thousands of different ideas I might have come across? What is it that, and it's so different for all of us, what
Mm.
out of those states of burnout or overwhelm or stress.
Mm. So going back a step, why? I mean, in some ways, it's daft that to even ask the question, but why are we feeling like I don't know what's been going on, but I suppose combined with that feeling that it feels like other people are handling it better. For me, it feels like other people are handling it better than me. But when you talk about it or you mention it or looking at the reaction to your posts about burnout, everyone's in the same boat. But I'm like, well, how are they walking down the street and not feeling like they might burst into tears? Or do you know? So that and it adds to it. So I suppose the first bit is, yeah, why are we feeling so tired and emotional?
So the why to me is about collective trauma. So I think, and I think that there is so important because we haven't been given space to process, everything in the UK at the moment, everything around us is like pushing us forwards, right? Just forget about what's just happened.
Mm.
Get out to the park, go to a restaurant, you can see your friends, let's have birthday parties again, soft play, without thinking, shall we just pause about, do we feel safe? How do we feel about what we've just been through? We've just experienced losses. Some of us have experienced big personal losses, but everyone experienced some sort of loss of just the future that we'd imagined, let alone the kind of little losses, like, well, they don't feel little, holidays and birthday
Mm.
parties and special events and all of Christmas, all of these things that we went through. So I think if we don't pause to just process the emotional cost of that, then there is a fallout, and
Mm.
I think that sense that you were talking about there of, well, everyone else seems to be okay. Well, that is that we are receiving from everywhere at the moment. Very hard to then go, I'm really not feeling okay, actually. I
Yeah.
feel shit and I keep crying at adverts, TV, that feel that we're able to let go of that sense of grief and loss. And it often does come out in those kind of funny places, like you're sitting watching a Disney kids and then like suddenly the whole of the emotion from the last year like just all comes at once.
Yeah.
But in terms of so I think that's really important to say, is just that I think it's a very normal experience at the moment to feel like you're the only one who's dealing with it because
Mm.
of the around. And then the why is because we have been in a state of, at the beginning, if you sort of cast your mind back last March, we were terrified. That was a
Mm.
experience, just to have this threat, invisible threat. We didn't know anything about it. We didn't know kind of how serious it was going to be. Yeah, and I have strong memories of that feeling of like, right, we've got to shut our doors and just hope for the best. And
Mm.
we were in a high anxiety for months. And yeah, we all kind of made but this is what we do. He's incredibly adaptable. So we made the best of it. We baked bread. We went out with our kids. We, kind of tried to homeschool or whatever we did. But at the same time, part of our brain, the whole time, responding to this threat still that is always existing. So you might remember feeling a bit, sometimes people look back at that time and they go, I can't remember much about that because actually it felt okay. But at the same time, I know that I was quite cut off because you just,
Mm.
in order to be able to deal with it.
And it's that there's been and when you think of it like that, is still going, because we're still like we've got a summer holiday that we booked last year thinking things would be,
Yeah.
and you go, well, I don't know, do we cancel it, and then you've also got all the opinions thrown at you, especially on social, about no one should be going on holiday, of course we should be going on holiday, we need to get the economy, and you're like it's a
Well,
lot.
I think if you think about the kind of process that we've been through, so there's that like real fear from spring last year. Then there was this kind of slightly false joy over the summer, like let's all pretend that none of that happened and we're going to have fun and just like put our blinkers on.
Yeah.
And then this awful winter that everybody experienced here, where we, that kind of sort of unexpected yet expected lockdown. And lockdown over winter, I think, was incredibly tough for people, particularly people trying to homeschool again, without having kind of, but also people with new babies, people who,
Yeah.
all of that. People with babies and toddlers are
Teenagers, I think you can kind of, this is what I think at one point you're kind of going, god, this is awful because we've got small kids, and then you start to go, but what about that person and that person, and you realize how shit it, yeah.
hard for everyone. But I think there is something about, for parents having to contain the feelings of their children, who I think a lot of children who were kind of okay in the first lockdown really were not okay in the winter when, all of a sudden things felt very uncertain again. They're taken away from their friends again. That kind of inconsistency is much harder for us to tolerate. So
Mm.
we were depleted ourselves, plus then really trying to support children. So I think that was a very hard time for people. And what I experienced in my clients and, other parents that I speak to was that everyone froze, so that was where we went into like proper shutdown, where
Mm.
that sort of survival mode. If you think about that kind of stress system and the fight, flight or freeze, we all froze at that point. It was, and if we imagine kind of what happens in our brains, it is like we just switch off a bit, a part
Mm.
of floats off. Like this is so hard and I'm so stressed, but I've got so much to do that I need to just compartmentalize completely.
Mm.
Just about, so that's the kind of survival mode.
Mm.
And a lot of people are talking about, feeling really foggy, and finding it really hard to motivate themselves. Lots of people started drinking a lot more over the lockdown,
Mm.
eating a lot more. It was that kind of like, just, okay, we need to just get through this.
Mm.
So, but this is my very long-winded way the original question, why we feel good now at this moment, is that we're releasing all of that. So
Mm.
from
So
kind of
we've been like kind of that.
like, oh, what's going to happen? And now we're like, okay, we got through that bit. Now we can go out again. But
Mm.
how do I actually feel in my body? I've got a lot to deal with. I've got a lot that I need to let go of. My kids actually are maybe okay now. Like my kids are at school. They seem to have settled again. So that too. Like our kids feel safe. So then we can think about how do we feel? Maybe nursery open up again. Maybe grandparents are helping out with childcare again. So we get for the first time in months the opportunity to then go, right, what is going on for me? And wow, actually, I feel like I've got a lot of emotions bubbling away in there and nowhere to let go of them, right? 'Cause that's the other thing, what you were saying, everybody else is kind of appearing to be okay.
Mm.
Or, which I think you said in
Yeah.
what everyone else is also going through something, who do I then speak to about how much I feel like I'm dealing with?
Normally you take it in turns, don't you? Like I've got a particularly, I think one of them's watching now. I've got a group of, there's three of us, and we would get together and someone would cry because somebody was having a shit time about something, whether it was a relationship or parent or whatever. But that was our, and it was kind of just, that's just how it happened. But when you're all sitting there and you're not just crying, you're not just sitting there going, oh my God, this is awful. You're sitting there going, yeah, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what to do. I don't know what, and
Thing.
it's so big. So you haven't got that same support because you're aware that you can't be taking from other people. But also, even when you say it out loud, likely, I mean, I know when I was looking for some counselling recently, and you'd say to someone, and they'd be like, "Yeah, no, me too." Like everybody was looking, and I tell you, there's a shortage, Emma.
I know. Yeah.
But
It's,
like it, because you're all in the same thing. So I suppose even then, I suppose it's not taking it personally, because you can then go, oh God, they think I'm being a drain. Or you can worry that, oh, do they think I'm being a drain if I moan about this, or their problem's worse than mine? So it's kind of trying to get into your head, look, everybody's in there. So you can't read anything from that, I guess.
but I think it's also worth slightly unpacking the idea that we're burdensome when we share our feelings.
Yeah.
That is often part of our conditioning, right? Like if I talk to somebody about how I feel and express my vulnerability, then I'm taking something from them. And if they do that to me and they turn, then I am giving something to them. Because we can often see it in that quite transactional way.
Mm.
And often that's because we haven't necessarily been brought up or comfortable exploring and expressing our emotions, especially the difficult ones.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about being a woman as well, right? We are here to meet other people's needs, these other people, and that if we want our needs to be met, then that is burdening them. But actually, if you think about what you really need at the moment, it's not necessarily a thing that somebody is going to give you. It is just space to process.
Mm.
And sometimes it is just about that shared experience. This is what I'm going through. That sounds really hard. This is what I'm going through. That sounds really hard too. I'm really
Mm.
going through that. I'm here with you,
Mm.
being together, really after having had, a year where we haven't really been with people.
Mm.
I think we can also feel a little bit awkward about that, can't we? Like,
Definitely.
yeah, how do we do this again? Like, how do we do stuff when we're not on Zoom and when we're actually, like, maybe even sitting together, hold each other? Like, that feels huge and can cause anxiety as well, because we do end up feeling a little bit awkward. But I think there's something so powerful in our capacity to heal each other in our relationships. And that's what we had at the beginning of all of this. There was this beautiful sense of a collective, we were all in this together. That was the narrative at the time. That has really fallen away recently. And I think particularly sort of a bit bombarded by different opinions.
Mm.
I think that's also part of where we are in our collective trauma,
Yeah.
because part of what we're releasing is anger. So,
Mm.
I asked a question in my stories a couple of weeks ago, like, have you noticed that people are much more reactive? And somebody, like loads of people were like, yeah, getting like shouted at in the street or, getting beat in the car. There was one mum who said that twice, I think, that week, she'd been quite seriously intimidated by people and somebody had shouted at her like while she was there. And it's that kind of everyone's just escalated because we're emotional and we don't have a place to release it. So it comes out like that, like shouting at somebody in Tesco's or getting really irate in the car. But if we can sort of pause and come back together in our communities, in our close relationships, then that is how we can then heal together, and it's not necessarily then about the giving and the taking. It's just here we are together, grief that we share in different ways. and we've all had different experiences, but we can be together through that, and through, reconnecting and reigniting those relationships with people, then we can start to think about how do we want to move forward, whatever is going to be the next bit of our lives.
Yeah, I think it's that the guilt piece is a big one as well, I think, for people. I know I had a message before this of somebody saying that in addition to the feeling tired and emotional, because their energy and their focus, I guess, is on surviving, which I think a lot of us, it's like, right, we've got to adjust, or adjusting. Maybe no, it's not so much just surviving, but adjusting to whatever this new setup is, and knowing you could get a phone call or an email and your kids are going to be sent home again, or we've got bloody half term. I mean, like, there's loads of people on Instagram going, oh, lovely, at least it's nearly half term. But it's like, what? It's another week.
Yeah.
Like, it's quite a lot when you've already done quite a lot. But I think because people are just kind of and our focus is quite narrow in lots of ways. I've seen lots of people, and I know I felt as well, who feel guilty that they're not, I don't know, doing, because there's been quite a lot of big political or big cultural things going on, which people know that they should be getting engaged with, or even kind of eco-anxiety, like all those big things, but you don't, maybe haven't got the capacity, or you don't feel knowledgeable enough, or you haven't got the time to really stop and think about it. So that's one, I think, that's almost, and it adds to the tired and emotional, because then you're going, oh, and I should be doing that, I should be engaging in that, I should be being a better person. But we're all so spent, we can't even start to do that.
But I think where's the end point? Like, when are we the best person? Like, like,
I'm nearly there, Emma. I'm trying.
Just need to do like that checklist of no, I think that's it. It's like, but like, when do we get there? Like, we are constantly in this state of betterment, and it shifts and changes all the time. So like we were saying before, when you were on your flick story, on one sense of being a better person is buying a really nice lipstick, and on the next it is getting engaged in global political issues, and you don't quite know on any of those things because you don't have the capacity to really think it through and reflect on what it means to you. I think that's part of the reactivity that I was talking about before. Like, right, come on, urgent, get back to everything. Let's get involved in this. Let's do this. Let's let our anger go on Boris. Let's like get really angry at that person who hasn't talked about Israel and Palestine. Like, let's just go. It takes us away from how do I actually feel. And I think we can do that quite a lot. I think, and it's particularly something that I think we do as Brits. It's that kind of stiff upper lip mentality. Like, we're not going to talk about our emotions. That's not part of our culture. But instead, we'll get angry about stuff, and we'll get kind of reactive, stressed about stuff, because that's a different way of manifesting our emotions.
But I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, that actually the people who are doing that, they're not being bad people, but they're using that energy, they're reacting, and that's maybe part of their processing of this. Whereas someone else's process might be like, I've got to retreat and just get my head around this. But what's difficult is that people are then crossed with the other people, and that's the bit that makes it really difficult. And I guess that's when social media is probably not the place to be, right?
I think I've noticed a lot of people stopping social media in these past few weeks because it can just feel so noisy. And I've taken a massive step back over the last couple of weeks just to reflect. And I think it's really important to do that. But they're not really, I'm going to say they're not really, sorry, someone's drilling outside. I don't know whether you can hear that. I don't think they're really cross with each other. They're cross about the world. And it's just a really nice way of expressing their grief and at their life situation is by shouting at somebody on Twitter. It's not a helpful way for emotions, because actually we don't get the resolution we need, which is actually to think about, what do I need to feel okay again? But it does allow us to release a bit of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And that might just make it a bit easier for us to go to bed that night.
So I suppose it's just for other people to just stop and go, okay, like, you can't necessarily let that affect you, or you have to try not to. what I mean, I think what you're saying about time to think and pause and obviously step away from social, and are those the biggest things that maybe people could be doing or should be doing if they're feeling this burnout and this just high emotion?
I think it's so unique for everybody. It really depends on your personality. Some people are desperate to get out and see friends, other people will need to retreat. So it's about tuning into your needs, and
Mm.
they are your needs, they're somebody else's. So what is going to work might not work for me.
Mm.
For some people, they're gonna want to get back out into high energy environments. For other people, will find that overstimulating and stressful, then pull back again.
Yeah, I think that's it as well. You can do it and then you go, oh, I might need to now have a bit of time. But it's not chock putting, which actually is not dissimilar to pre-pandemic, where you would put too many things in the diary. You do one thing and be like, that was really nice, but then you'd see you had something a couple of nights later and be like, oh no, that's too much.
And I think,
Yeah.
it is, we were already depleted. We lived in a very stressful way before the pandemic. Our kids are also depleted. So I think even back to school or seeing people, it's gonna take more out of us now than it would have done before, because we're not quite used to it. I mean, our kids have had like 3 months at home with very little to do.
I still can't believe it.
But to go to that, then let's go to school every day, and
Yeah, clubs,
swimming and
friends.
this, and you've got that, and you go play dates, and although I mean, my kids definitely at the moment just want to come home and completely zone out, because it feels really overwhelming. It will take us a while to like re-socialize. It is re-socializing, like even just stepping out back into the world again. I still get a shock like going into the local cafe, like, oh right,
I can sit here. I know, but that is a really weird way to live. I suppose when you look at it at the basic level of that everything you do, or hugging people, you're still like, it's like, but that is so weird to think that a bit over a year ago, or yes, going into a cafe, putting a mask on. I was thinking that today, like, this is still so weird that we do that, but we all do it. Well, not everyone, but most of us do it. And it's just habit, and it's weird.
part of you is thinking that is really weird and new and strange, and I don't like it, and it makes me feel stressed.
Mm.
And that part of us is being buried further and further deeply over the course of this year, so that the other part of us, the kind of public facing part of us, can just get on with our lives.
Mm.
So really, I mean, what you were saying before about what do we need to do, I would say it's noticing that we need this kind of public face as well. For it's adaptive, it's what we need to do as adults with responsibilities. But don't forget about that little part that is still going, this is really weird, and actually I feel quite scared, and I'm really, really tired. What does that part of me need? And it will be different for everybody. So it might be, actually, I need to just clear the deck next week, and I don't want to go anywhere for half term. Anybody, I just want to go back into lockdown for a week and just be with my family and feel safe and sort of snugly at home.
Yeah.
Like, great, I can go to Portugal, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make sure that I see as many people as I possibly can, because that's what energizes me and makes me feel good.
And I suppose acknowledging that those are all okay, like, because I think that when you kind of think, oh, why don't I feel like that, or why does that, or people feel the need to voice their opinion of what other people are choosing to do or not do, and it's so individual, and it changes as well depending on how you're feeling that week or how your kids are behaving.
But changes with the news too, right? Like, we've been bombarded with such a lot of difficult news recently, so
So
it's
much.
perspective and how safe we feel to make decisions and do. But I think it is, it's been really hard. Like, I think the question that you asked was, why are we feeling so tired and emotional? And it's like, well, how could we not be feeling tired and emotional? Like, how could we have possibly survived this
Yeah.
and not be feeling depleted and a bit emotional at times?
Yeah.
Because we're human beings and we feel things.
Yeah. And if you went back to us pre-March and said, this, by the way, this is what's going to happen, and then about a year later you're all going to be ready, you'd be like, of course. It's not strange, is it? Because it's still really big.
It's still really big. It will change the course of our lives. Like it's huge. It is the biggest thing to have happened to most of us, and it will change society. I mean, it's massive, and I think the more that we can hold on to that, the less that we can feel like, oh, I'm not coping. There's something about me that means that I'm not doing this
Yeah,
right.
yeah. That is, yeah, and that's not the case, is it? I
Oh,
think no. Well, thank you so much. I think
oh,
I think what if anyone isn't, I'm sure everyone's following you, but if they're not, I just find it really useful because I'll see something that you've said, and it will just be like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. I think, and around, and also it's not just about new mums, because I think that's the whole point, isn't it? It's ongoing.
I,
A lot of the stuff around maternal mental health.
yes,
Um,
but always later, right? That's what they say. But always forevermore.
yeah, lovely. Thank you so much.
Lovely to speak to you, Steph. Thanks for
Yeah, and you. I hope I can see you at some point.
and we can hug.
Yes. Yeah, I'm all for hugs. Every time I do hug anyone, I just hold on that little bit longer until it's slightly uncomfortable, and then I'll release.
My emotions come up like when I'm holding people. It's just that like, oh, we can touch each other again. But
Yeah,
things that will make us feel better.
yeah.
It's not that I'm going to start meditating every morning or get 5. It's like, what's the stuff that I've really missed? I mean, some people
Connection.
have not hugged. I've really missed hugs. So
Yeah.
that's what I need. I need to.
Connection with people who you're really, I think the connection with people who you're really comfortable with. Like, I don't think anyone missed the school run, and all the people that you know but you don't know. But the one parent, or I'm seeing my best friends next weekend. We've got, because it was all our 40th, and we are all so like clinging on to, we just need to get there because it'll be this release, obviously, of not having the kids, but also just it's so comfortable because they're like from 30-year-old mates. So you're like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you can just all hold hands.
yeah, the whole time while we eat, just no one let go. I'll tie us together. That's all I want. I just want to be there with them. So yeah,
I'll enjoy it.
yeah, I will. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.